but I am so busy. And I must apologize to Sandy as well because I made a commitment and so on. But maybe if you just knew that the next 2 to 3 months is basically my last months in the bank, and they are squeezing every drop of blood out of me. I have to train somebody to take over from me. I'm finishing major projects, but I thought, I wanted to share with you this evening something, okay, that this last couple of weeks I had the young people that the bank took in on a youth employment program to give them experience. Now, we have the highest youth unemployment rate in the world in South Africa. Currently, only about 13% of our youth are employed. And so it's massive. And as weird as they brought these precious young people in, there was roughly about 70 of them, and the bank pays them for a full year, gets them the experience, and they asked me to do uh, write a special course for them. And you all know I've got a bit of Ellen White in the background when I do these things. And so I really, I sat and I thought about it. And so I wrote a 4.5 hour course that dealt not with specifically the bank, but you as a person in the bank, honesty, morality, okay, doing the right thing. And I was quoting Ellen White throughout it. And on Friday, I got well, I got not one, but two emails and a phone call from very senior people who said, "Where are you finding this stuff?" Okay, off the internet. People are so hungry for a message, for just doing the right thing. Because once you are at that, then you know that the Holy Spirit is starting to work in your life. We have become, as a modern society, so used to doing the wrong thing and getting rewarded for it. Unfortunately, that's the thing in our country. I don't know so much about America or so, but I can talk for my own country, where you get rewarded for doing the wrong thing. Okay, there's no more law that protects anybody. The ones that do the evil and do the wrong are getting away with it, while the righteous are being persecuted. And I think if we look at in the greater context of Seventh-day Adventism and what we believe as a group here, all right, we are well on our way to what you just said, the world order. It's happening. Um, I'm going. One of
The
the
world
things
is
that we
getting crazy.
it
The
Sandy, it is
the United
unbelievably
States are,
crazy.
and the world is. But I've found that there's a lot of people that feel like we do because they were
Yes.
raised this way, or they, and everything's okay. They know what's coming, but there is a whole world out there that has no
Yes.
clue. And we're in our own little world, and it's like, come on, you guys, it's not that bad. It's going to be all right. And then you realize they have no hope. They have no clue. Um, Even if they think he's coming again, things like they don't really have that knowledge that we do. I
Yeah.
don't think. I mean, it's just a lot of them do, but a lot of them don't, and they're afraid. And can
People
you
are
imagine
afraid.
people that don't have that hope, that don't
No.
have that knowledge?
I don't
It's
know
a
how many times I've said,
scary
I
world.
don't know how in the world people that don't have God to trust and see Him through, I don't know how in the world they make it.
But Marty, it's and this has really become quite a thing with what I'm doing, for instance, in a secular environment, is to introduce it to people through the goodness. And once again, when you read
Mm.
through what has your religion done for you out of our higher calling, Ellen White talks about that exactly. Okay, she says, don't go with doctrine, go with the goodness, go with the Lord in you. Let them see that. Let them understand. Let them know that you are truly interested in what they are about.
Yeah.
That is the real crux of being a Seventh-day Adventist Christian.
And then they ask you why and how you know that, and then you can share more.
But
Yeah,
you
So
know,
it's
Hein, in this day and time, so many people profess to be Christian and go their own way and don't really live
yeah,
anything except just what they want to do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We won't
well,
mention names, but I've had
that's
an
for
incident here
them.
in the last month. We had maybe I shouldn't talk about it. Are you recording? It's only,
Yes.
okay, so I'm not going to
And we
talk
need to
about
get
that, but
started before too long anyway. So,
yeah, thank you. Thanks for letting me talk. Thank you. Uh, Hi, Linda. Hi, Ed. Thank you for the
Hello.
email. Hi, Keith, Violet, Bridget. Yes, Mr. Camacho as well. All of you, Wendy, you're all getting, or some of you are getting my daily updates. If anybody are getting my morning devotions and the things, please, if you don't want them, just let me know, because I'm sharing with everybody. It's sort of part of my ministry now. I share morning devotion and a song with people. It's also I do it with non-Adventist people. It's become actually very popular. I've got over 500 people I send it out in the mornings.
Oh, excellent.
And I've got some very good responses to it. But if you don't want, if you already have 5,000 of these things coming your way, just say, "I stop." I've got already. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Let's begin with Psalms 95, verse 7. And first of all, welcome and happy Sabbath to you all. So the Bible says, "Oh, come, let us sing unto the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let's come before his presence with thanksgiving, and make a joyful noise unto him with songs. For the Lord is a great God, and a great King above all gods. His hand in the deep places of the earth. The strength of the hills is his also. The sea is his, and he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let's worship and bow down. Let's kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand." And of course, we come today because the Bible tells us to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gate. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Amen.
okay, Keith, are you ready? We can go ahead, and it's a little early, but that's okay since we're on Zoom and people are still here.
Well, let's open with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, guide me today in the words that I say. And because this is a lot of today is going to be from the pen of Mrs. White as she wrote to one of her very dear friends. Please guide everybody with their health, be with delight, as let her know that you are standing by her side. And everybody else that is lonely and having problems, have them realize that you are there for them each and every hour of the day. Amen. Well, usually the stuff that I present is either from the Bible or it's from a CD I have with all of Ellen White's writings. But today, about a couple weeks ago, I was on the Ellen G. White website, and I was going through a lot of the pictures, and I seen there was some information there that there was a letter that actually was more than one letter that she wrote, and I was very impressed to do a message on this here. And even though this dealt with what was going on in her life and her husband's life, that there is many things that was going on then that we can apply to our day. And it's going to be about the exceptions of people at the time of the end that receive visions. And it's going to be our job to discern, are these visions from heaven or are they from another sources? And you see, when Ellen White started getting these visions, there was people then that did not believe that they was coming from heaven. And these letters is some of the letters that she wrote. And you'll see who these people are that she wrote. You'll recognize them. Joel 2:28, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, not some, but all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. So if it comes to a servant and we say, well, this person is just a servant and we don't believe him, guess who's going to fall short? And also if it comes to the handmaid, because it is going to come to everybody. And this is what she wrote about this. Pentecost repeated with greater power, and I've used this quote before. It is with an earnest longing that I look forward to the time when the events of the day of Pentecost shall be repeated. And I know Abel talked about it. I have talked about it for a long time, that that these things are going to be, I have two applications, some of them even more, and that they're going to be repeated with even greater power than on that occasion. John says, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. Then, not before, then, as that the Pentecostal says, the people will hear the truth spoken to them, every man in his own tongue. So, when you see this in the book of Revelation, where it says another angel come down from heaven having great power, is that going to happen on the day of Pentecost? It might. And the whole world is going to be lighted with his glory. And there's Mrs. White seeing one of her visions, her many visions. Now, when she started having visions, there was some people that was having a controversy with whether they believed or not. And these letters are to Harriet Smith. And if you want to know who Harriet Smith is, she is the wife of Uriah Smith, daughter of Cyprian Stevens, and sister of J.N. Andrews' wife, Angelina. So Uriah Smith, J.N. Andrews married sisters. And I found this on the Ellen G. White site. I thought that was very interesting. Now let's see. Letter to Harriet Smith, Uriah's wife. Dear sister, well, got here. Let me. Dear Sister Harriet, I think it is my duty to unburden my mind to you this morning. After we came home from the West, you will know that a burden rested upon us. We felt no union with the church generally, and I spent our Sabbaths at home. We'll stop there and make a comment. When we today, sometimes people don't get it when they don't feel welcome in churches, so that they spent their Sabbath at home. Mrs. White did this. So, you know, don't think that you're lost because you don't go to a church. She felt no union with the church. Understand that. Continuing, but I will go back. When we come home from the east last fall, I told James, her husband, that I had no liberty to bear my testimony in the church at Battle Creek, but he urged me to do so. I continued to do so, but to the discouragement of my own soul. And when I prayed in the meeting house, I had so little freedom. I told my husband it should be the last time. I know not the occasion of all this. I felt the same when relating or reading a vision of Uriah's and your presence that was in their home that he was talking about. I was reluctant to do so and had no freedom and felt a strange dissatisfaction. Have you ever felt a strange dissatisfaction when you was around people who call themselves believers? She felt she didn't have the freedom. She felt that this is after she was had some visions. Nobody was listening to her and her husband, and this is what this letter to Harriet was. While in Knoxville, some things were explained to me, which I was ignorant of before. While at a meeting at Brother Kellogg's, the whole matter was shown me at Knoxville was open before me. Things came vividly to mind, which it had been impossible for me to recall. I was shown while at Knoxville the state of things at Battle Creek. I was shown the case of C. Smith's family and was pointing back to the visions which they had not heeded. In other words, they had visions. It was about them. They were supposed to do something, and they did, and they refused to do them because they did not heed it. Then I saw Fletcher, Uriah, yourself, and that's Harriet, and other individuals. It seemed to be a chain of connection with dissatisfied feelings and watching James and me with jealousy and suspicion. You see, there was people, these people knew her very well, and they had jealousy and suspicion. Suspicion of what? Suspicion that these may not be coming from Helen. And the ones that knew that was coming from heaven, they were jealous. Why? Because they wasn't in that spot. Even though when they got them, was told certain things, they did not heed them. Uriah and James were showing me a distance apart from each other, not united. Darkness was in the office. The angels of God were grieved and had but little to do with the work there. There was a secret dissatisfaction, all carried on in darkness, concealed from us. So James and Ellen, they could feel this here, that there was and she was showing that there was a secret dissatisfaction. This is why she was writing to Harriet, because Harriet was right in the center of this whole thing. And it says there's darkness in the office. Have you ever been in a where you was working and you felt this darkness there? I'm sure a lot of people have. Then I saw J.H. Wagner and the communications between him and Uriah. Uriah wronged James in writing to Brother Wagner, and Brother Wagner wronged him by not being open and frank. In other words, talking about things, but not talking about what you truly that you believe. If Brother Wagner had said to Uriah, if Brother White is wrong in his feelings in regard to you, I am more so. I have burdened his mind with my feelings in regard to these things. Do not judge harshly of Brother White in this matter, for I was equally to blame. In other words, it's not my husband's fault, all of his fault. I am just as fault, equally as fault. And to apply this to our lives today, a lot of times we say, well, somebody did wrong. I had nothing to do with it. But if you go back and look, you may have had just the wrong, just led this person to those things, to those same wrongs. And we will get to what Brother James White was talking about here in a little bit. Then matters would have been left in a different shape. But that matter was not left right. It was left half finished with all the censure upon James, like many other things. Have you seen censure today? Yeah, it's everywhere. God frowns upon such injustice. There was occasion for Brother Wright's feelings and Brother Wagner's, but their feelings were so strong and their course was wrong in not going directly to Uriah and talking over matters with him. See, that's what it tells us in the Bible, that if we have a problem with somebody, we need to go to them and talk to them about it. But Uriah and your wrong was still greater in carrying the matter to others and writing to Welcome before speaking to James upon the matter. And I do not know if she did go to Uriah direct, but this here was a letter to his wife. And apparently Mrs. White knew that as she wrote to his wife, that he would get the message. Let's see here. It is still looked upon that Brother White dealt too plain, and you are not free in this matter. From what has been shown me, he dealt no plainer than the case to serve. And the dissatisfaction and warfare against the testimony and visions there, born must be seen, felt, and acknowledged. You see, this is one of the reasons that I talk about this, is because what is going to cause the split in the church, the dividing of the wheat and tare? It's going to be the straight testimony. And you see, there is people that will not like that straight testimony. They didn't like it then, and they're not going to like it in the future. See, and born must be seen, felt, and acknowledged, or they will be subject to wrong influences and the temptation of the devil. They will appear to be united with us, but when in God's order, plain dealing or reproofs are given, all the past is called up, and the same warfare commences, and they are more liable to sympathize with those who are wrong than with the right. And I believe that there will be people at the time of the end. This will also affect them directly. When they are reproved, they will, well, somebody over here agrees with me, so I'm going to go there, instead of righting the wrong. As it's talked about, the past is called up and the same warfare commences. Okay, continuing. All these things will have to be realized and through work made. The influence and feelings which existed in Paris, and I believe that's Paris, New York, has affected your judgment and still sways your mind. You have received and cherished feelings that Brother White was too hard and severe. You see, he's giving the direct testimony. And if one is censored or has plain matters of fact laid before them, they complain of Brother White's severity. You see, we do that today when someone says, Keith, you're in the wrong. I go and says, well, this person here is attacking me, and I get upset because they're attacking me, not pointing out to, and instead they're pointing out things I need to change in my life. And you stand all ready to sympathize with them. In this, you come short of being a co-worker with God and his angels. God lays a burden on his servants that things are not right. He must bear a plain testimony. It is not pleasant for him to do this. And you see, at the time of the end, when the straight testimony comes out, it will not be pleasant for us either. He would gladly be excused. In other words, go and talk about something else, do something else instead. He would gladly be excused, but must do his duty regardless of the consequences. Just as long as God has a people, just as long as he has a church, he will have those who will cry aloud and spare not, who will be his instruments to reprove selfishness and sin. You see, that's one of the things that James White was doing, that we are to reprove selfishness and sin. We need that in our lives today, and will not shun to declare the whole counsel of God, not part, the whole counsel of God. Whether men will hear or forbear, I saw that individuals would rise up against the plain testimonies. You see, that's going to happen again. And why? Because it does not suit their natural feelings. See, we are not to allow natural feelings to control us. They would choose to have their smooth things spoken unto them and have peace cried out in their ears. And that there is the same thing today. They don't want to hear about the statutes. They want to have, smooth stuff spoken to them. You would choose to be flattered and caressed, but this is not the work that God has assigned us. Individuals have been watching James with jealousy and suspicion. And you see, today when people talk about James and Ellen White, they do not talk about people back then watching them with jealousy and suspicion. As I bet that there's people who look at Mrs. White with jealousy and suspicion also, even today. You would choose to be flattered and caressed, but this is not the work that God has assigned us. Individuals have been watching James, say we already read that. Let's see. While he was left in darkness as to the real state of their feelings, and they were doubting the message which the Lord has given. I saw that a great trial was before the church at Battle Creek. I saw that James must be careful whom he trusted or confided in. And see, we're not told that today. And the same thing, I believe, was for Mrs. White. For he was watched by some of his brethren at Battle Creek and watched by those in the office, especially by yourself, talking to his wife, Uriah Smith's wife, especially by yourself, Uriah and Fletcher. I saw that the leaven of dissatisfaction that worked in Paris and Rochester, that's in New York, has been at work here. The message which the Lord gave in Paris was doubted. And you see, the same thing happens today when we give the message about that we must keep the statutes and the judgments, because a lot of people doubt it. The plain reproofs that my husband there bore were not received, but he was looked upon as being hard and severe. But I was shown that he had borne a mild testimony. He would have merited the displeasure of God. In other words, he was putting it there the way God wanted him. And if he would have been the smooth things, the displeasure would have been from God, is basically what she's saying there. The feelings of those in Paris were not in union with the spirit and work of God. We also heard that about 1888. And they realized not the sacrifices and self-denial that must be made by them as well as others to fill their place in the work of God when they were reproved. Instead of searching carefully their own hearts and confessing their wrongs, self rose up. It can't be so. And you see today when people get the message of the statutes and the judgments, see, they're being reproved. They're getting a straight testimony. But instead of searching carefully and confessing their wrongs and changing, this, it all becomes about them again and their feelings and everything else. They dwelled upon what they regarded as Brother White's severity, sympathized with each other, linked together in their unbelief and dissatisfaction, and they never yet have seen and realized their wrong course or our sufferings in Paris, which need not have been as severe as it if they had taken the right course. You see this thing that happened in 1888, when people was reproved, it started long time before 1888. All this is recorded and will yet appear before them as true light, just as heaven regards it. They were willing to think that they had been dealt too severely with. Oh my, they're people don't want the state testimony. Satan helped them in the matter. Angels were grieved and turned from them, and they went into great darkness. See, this is what happens when you don't take the reprovement, the Holy Spirit, when it tells you you're wrong. They rejected the means which God had chosen to correct them, and their discernment began. A right and wrong spirit was gone. Brother J.N. Andrews sympathized with his friends in Paris. See, it wasn't just, there was a whole bunch of people that was rejecting some of these things that James White had said in these two places in New York. Their feelings and their course of action affected him, influenced his mind, and his judgment and his sympathies were perverted. And he often stood on the side of those who were cautioned or reproved and caused trouble instead of healing the difficulty. And it wasn't until 2005 to 2010 that I met John and the people at Bible Exploration. And I know that there was a lot of doubt when he started bringing these things forward. I know a lot of people went against it. It's the same thing that went against Ellen White back then. This all rose from not having sympathy and influence with those whom he should have confidence in, and leaving those to bear and fully feel their burden who were not right. That by diligent search of their own course, they might make straight and through work. Things of Paris were left at loose ends, all prepared for Satan to tangle into a perplexing knot to suit himself. In other words, if things aren't taken care of and there's a vacuum left, Lucifer will move right in, and the confusion and the perplexing things will increase. I was pointed back in a way to the time when those in Paris, especially Brother Andrews and Stephen's families, were ensnared by error, and for years were in perfect deception of Satan. See, we aren't told that. They suffered while in this error, but they never will obtain a particular of reward for it. If they had been willing to be taught and receive light in God's appointed way, they would not have been held in error, fanaticism, and darkness all that length of time. But self would not yield to the light God gave. Their feelings and impressions were sufficient evidence for them, and they would not be corrected until they were overwhelmed and compelled to acknowledge the power of God. In other words, they're put up against the wall and they had to make a choice. There's people that will do that same thing today. While God was directing and counseling in regard to those matters, that his work would move forward with freedom, their feelings were in opposition to it. They had been standing in the counsel of God. They would have been in union with his work and with the angels, but individuals were ignorantly warring against the leadings of God and had no realizing sense of their fearful position of being united with evil angels in their opposition to the advancement of God's work. And his opening providence had they believed what the Lord had shown in regard to those matters. They need not have been moved in such perfect blindness. See, do we want to be in a thing called perfect blindness today? That's why we have to be very receptive when then the Holy Spirit tells us something. All that work of God must be acknowledged, and with decision and position taken in these things, or Satan will improve every opportunity to throw in doubts and suggestions and jealousy. and the leaven will continue to work. This leaven must be purged out. And you see, the people who don't keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread, they don't understand this message about getting the leaven purged out. When God's hand has reached down and he moves his people to the right or left, it is of the greatest importance that they acknowledge his hand and firmly take their position that God has done this. And remember, this is in letters to Mrs. Smith. The state of things in Rochester should be a warning to all who are tempted to doubt the teachings of God or to find fault with the straight testimony and reproofs given by Brother White. You see, this straight testimony at the time and again is going to be given again. And it's going to be given first to the church. And it's going to cause, as far as I understand, it's going to cause a big problem in the church. It's going to cause the division of the wheat and tares. Satan has kept the mind in perfect darkness in regard to those things. God is not to be trifled with. Sufferings and agony in his servants bore in Rochester, while striving with all their energies to do his work. Satan and evil angels were at war with them, and many professing to present truth united with these evil powers to discourage and cause mental anguish, which might have been avoided. And you see, Satan is doing that same very thing to do. For the people that's out there trying to give the statutes and the judgments, he is trying to discourage us with some of these things that we should not be worried about. They were co-workers with the power of darkness. Notwithstanding the example of Rochester and their present condition, which should be a warning, the same work has been going on at Battle Creek in a secret, underhanded, deceptive manner. And you see, we have been told about some of the stuff with Christian, with the Trinity and stuff. But you see, when they keep things in secret and in a deceptive manner, then a lot of people don't know what is really going on. The same spirit which existed in Paris and Rochester has revived, and there is no safety or confidence to hope for better things until the past is all straightened out by frankly acknowledging God's work. If it tears self and self-dignity all to pieces. And I think Wendy talked a little bit about that today, about submitting yourself completely to Jesus Christ. But it also takes a determination that you have to go and find out the truth, no matter where the truth may be. There is a thorough opposition in this place against plain testimony, and Harriet, none are so thoroughly opposed to it as yourself. Now, see, that is a reproof right there. Mrs. White told Harriet, Uriah Smith's wife, that she is so opposed with what her and James are doing. And yet you are in close connection with the work of God and in constant opposition and rebellion to the one he has laid burdens upon to reprove, to counsel, and to manage in his cause. You see how close to home this was? Some of Mrs. White's closest friends. And it's right there. And apparently I assume that her and Uriah Smith got over this. Says a true witness, I know thy works. It has been to disaffect the minds of others in regard to James, to place him in a wrong light before them, and put on a distressed appearance, which has had its influence with a number of individuals. Yet you faithfully conceal all this from us. This is to Harriet. she's talking. But I have been shown that the counsel and straight testimony will not cease as long as God has anything to do with this church and with this office. Has anybody been trying to place the wrong light on the people that worship at Bible explorations? Yeah, this hasn't changed. The plain testimony will cut to the right and left, and the church will have to be hewed and squared. The planning knife of God will pass over them. And if individuals will not bear the straight work, they will be laid aside as useless timber. Now, as we go into the time of the end, bringing the straight testimony, if we do not bear the straight work, we will be laid aside as useless timber. And guess what? God will find somebody else to take our place. And they will be laid aside as useless timber, unfit to have any place in the cause of work of God. Harriet, I was shown the past position John occupied after he went to Wakan. The spirit of rebellion that arose there is not dead yet. The warfare that has been waged against James and the testimony given to God must be given up if everyone in the office is removed. Oh, Harriet, your past course for months was unfolded to me. In other words, it looks like she got this in vision of talking about Harriet. Your opposition of feeling to James, you're manifesting so much agony of feelings if there is counsel or slightest reproof given to the office, and you're professing so much fear of James as though he were a tyrant. You have been deceived and acted under a perfect deception of the devil, and have deceived others in regard to James. So Harriet was part of the problem. Your parents has exerted the worst possible influence. If you had felt aggravated, Brother White was the one for you to have gone to and freely unburden your mind to him. Then you would have been convinced that your feelings arose from prejudice, misunderstanding, and misconstruction of his words. In other words, people will come to Bible explorations when we was over there. They will come on and give an entirely misconstruction of everything that was said there. God's frown is upon these things, that a company so closely connected to his work as Uriah, Harriet, and James should be so exclusive and secretive as you have been. Have you known anybody that has been so secretly been against everything and found out about it later? It's kind of upsetting. Uriah and you have not felt this as you should. When a word of admonition or given counsel is given that crosses your feelings and ideas, instead of looking closely and seeing that there was a cause for it and confessing that you might be wrong, you have kept silent and considered you was suffering wrongfully, and Brother White was censorious, exacting, and severe. In other words, it's not, you're telling Harriet, it's not, you didn't feel it was your fault when you was admonished. It is James White's fault because he was too severe. Oh, Harriet, whether you realize it or not, those feelings came from a selfish, unconsecrated heart. Brother White is not perfect. In the ardor of his feelings, he may speak too strongly, and if you at times feel injured in confidence, open your mind to him. In other words, come to him and talk to him about it. He would not be backward to relieve your mind of any burden he could. And if you and Uriah were as free to confess when you err as he has been, there would not be the trouble which now exists. And you see, this is why some people, I know Pastor Brims when he was alive, you know, if there was a problem, he'd come and talk about it. John, if there's a problem, he would talk about it. You know, if there's a problem, talk about it. Communication. Don't go behind backs and start talking about other stuff that is injurious to them. I repeat, there have been a perfect chain of dissatisfaction from Paris to Battle Creek. I saw that you could help in the cause of God if you were right. But in your present state, with your feelings, you would only be a curse. Would you ever want that to be said about you? Would you ever want that to be said? I know I would not want that to be said. God comes to me and says, you're a curse to the people around you. It would devastate me. There has been 2 spirits in the office at Rochester and 2 spirits in the office at Battle Creek. And the Lord has shown that the spirit of reproof should never die out of the office. In other words, when there is no reproof, that means that these other spirits will take over. And that there is the same as if the straight testimony. You cannot get rid of the straight testimony. 2 years ago was a proof given for Uriah and yourself. Read it over and see if it has been heeded. I saw that the Lord's providence has sustained James, but your feelings have been to tear him down. Another direct message to Harriet. I have been shown faults and wrongs of individuals who profess perfect confidence in the visions. You see, this here, I believe, was all about the visions. But she doesn't exactly say that, except for here. Who professed perfect confidence in the visions, but found fault with the instrument. In other words, we understand the visions, but the problem is Mrs. White. The natural feelings of their heart rise up in rebellion against the visions which had exposed their errors and evil. Instead of humbly acknowledging they had erred, they found fault with the matter which it was delivered. And you see, we have that same problem today. When someone comes and reproves us, tells us you're doing wrong, we turn around and point at the person telling us they're the ones that's wrong, instead of turning around and says, I'm sorry, I need to change. You know, this is what John the Baptist did. Repent and be baptized. If you're not going to repent, there's no need to be baptized. But Satan leads them on blindfolded in regard to the true state of their feelings until he takes them in his snare. Harriet, I saw that a strange work was going on here for months in the past. There has been a strengthening the hands of one another in unbelief of the visions, because the wrongs of some have been reproved. I feel crushed in spirit that I have been abused. I have no more testimony to bear in Battle Creek until there is an entire change. And see, this is what it started out with, that she did not want to go to Battle Creek to preach or to give those testimonies. And it was her husband, James, who says, you must go. This is darker than the work in Rochester, and it's certainly worse. For I saw that they had their example and present condition before them as a warning. And have we been warned today? Yes, we have been many times by Mrs. White. But do we heed them? I can say a lot of times we do not. And this here is some of the things when Mrs. White got visions. She, right afterwards, did not remember what was in the vision. And this here talks about that. It is impossible to call up things which have been shown me, unless the Lord brings the same before me at the time and on the occasion that he is pleased to have me relate it. Now, I want to, if you are going to study the statutes and the judgments, you must learn them and understand them. And then if you forget them, he will bring them to your mind later to refresh your memory on those things. I have a very short memory. Now we got two more pictures or two more slides. The next picture is Ellen White addressing the 1901 General Conference session, Battle Creek, Michigan, April 12, 1901. And that there is Mrs. White speaking at the pulpit. And the article goes on and it names all the people that's around here. And it looks like this guy over here may not be paying that much attention. Anyway, when I went through this with Harriet, I seen in my own life how the things that when I'm told to change, when I'm told, Keith, you're doing something wrong, I don't want to hear it. And that's the same thing that was going on there. She was very direct to Harriet. And you see, she even told him that she was a big part of the problem. And when we come into the time of the end, I know myself, I don't want to be told, Keith, you're part of the problem. Because I know most people don't talk about, they think everything was hunky-dory back then. Everybody believed everything all the time. No, it wasn't that way. There was a lot of people that was against Mrs. White. Hey, eventually they sent her to Australia.
Oh,
They got tired of the straight testimony and sent her to Australia. Joy Barry, heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us today. Please, when I need reproving, reprove me. Help me so that when I hear a straight testimony, that it comes to my heart and that I can listen. In your name, amen.
thank you, Keith. That's an interesting church history there. Yeah.
Wow. Praise the Lord. Thank you, Keith.
I did not know that Harriet Smith and Andrew's wife was sisters.
It's very interesting. I saw that slide up there.
Yeah, I got that was on Ellen. You know, when you go to the Ellen G. White estate, they have a place there where there's pictures, and they have, I don't know, tens of thousands. I spent a whole day going through pictures.
Oh, I've been there as well, Keith. I love those pictures, eh?
Yeah,
Uh,
it puts a face to some of the things you hear, the people you hear.
Right.
well, you know the historical context when you start, like you say, have a picture of the reality of what it was. A lot of the messages I've been trying to bring over the past number of years is to really place it in the context of where Mrs. White was. All right.
Yeah.
I've sort of tangled with this Steve Daly guy, and I've now just disassociated myself totally when they came up with some. I won't even mention it here in good company what he was saying, what they were saying about Mrs. White. It's just nauseating. Okay, even if it wasn't Mrs. White, just what they were saying about a person and the insinuations that were making. And that to me is really where people start going horribly wrong. Okay, it's like a pendulum. They either go too far right or too far left. There's no midway. There's no like I said this evening to somebody, there's no pragmatism and there's no practicality to what we believe. It's either the one or the other. And then if it's the one or the other, we can't talk to each other in brotherly love anymore. You're either right or you're wrong according to you, or everybody else is wrong. And is that not what we came out of? And I think if you read that Mrs. White was talking to people, whatever, and trying to make things right. You know, guys, once again, remember it was in a time when women couldn't vote, when women were seen as property. My
She
goodness.
she
Just
wasn't supposed to speak in front either.
it's just like she had to be. The message had to be from God. It had to be.
Well, that's why in the beginning there was a lot of people that was against her, and
Yeah.
people don't talk about that.
Yeah. But you know, like I said, this other gentleman, and please don't go look at his stuff. I'm not saying that you mustn't have the freedom, but don't waste your time because this guy is just vile. Okay, he's a ex-pastor, 35 years, California conference, worked at some whatever as a psychologist. He's just cuckoos. Sorry for the Afrikaans word, but he's cuckoos. Okay, um, honest to goodness, I have yet to read so much nonsense. Okay, there are people who wrote the whole thesis on why Ellen White is right, and we know the whole story Locke's talking about. But this guy's just vile, and he's drawing a lot of people in that are coming in. And if you really want to see just how people's souls look that have not been exposed to the truth, go and read what that guy brings in. It's
Well,
it's
one
it's
of the
it's really bad, and it's what you were saying. If she was here today, let me tell you, probably 70% of the Adventist church would reject her as well.
Oh yeah, and you see that's what when she says if you continue your same course, you're going to be like a curse. When I look at my life, that's the last thing on this planet I want to be considered as.
Correct.
And you see, that's called the straight testimony.
Yes.
And see, when John Vandenberg came out and started talking about the statutes and the judgments, you know how much stuff went against him? There was a lot, and I wasn't around, Bible explorations then,
Mm.
but I know from the way that people behave that there was a lot of stuff people did that was against him.
Keith,
And
can
that's
I
one of those
just,
things they'll have to answer for.
yeah, I want to add to what you're saying there, and I want to ask Sandy, and I might be putting you on the spot here, Sandy. But you know what? What I would maybe one day, if you have an opportunity, is maybe to hear what your dad went through. Maybe do an hour for us on those beginning years, the background. You were there. What was he going through? What was the story behind the story? So it can be kept for posterity that we can tell people, this is where, because I'm going to tell you why I'm asking that is because we're currently preparing probably a 2 or 3 part series we're going to do at Tabernacles, based on some of the comments that Walter Fight has just made around the feast. Okay, he's done a thing on the feast, and it's just getting more and more ridiculous by the day. Okay, now the feast keepers and the feast keeping comes from Vatican II. All right, which in fact sorry to say, ladies, but I had to go put on some new underpants. I laughed so much. Okay, um, I just could not believe how ridiculous that was. Okay, because if you've ever read Vatican II, the opening sermon that what do they call it, the bull or whatever that the Pope did, it was to unify all churches worldwide. We all know that. Okay, how did he do that? By the feast? No, 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 no. The Trinity. Right up front, he puts the Trinity. Go read it. And Walter Fight is worrying about one little piece of paragraph stuck away somewhere in the annexure, and he made a whole hour about how Vatican II has now caused us, and he's referring to us as the feast keepers. We come from Vatican II. So I can now see that we now all these little Jews and little Jesuits sitting behind bushes now waiting for the church to come by so we can hit them over the head with a tent pole from Tabernacles or something. Okay, and I'm going to answer that because Johan Venter phoned me and he said, "Hein, did you watch this?" I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Hein, let's do something together." So I've at last got Johan now he's now angry enough to do something about this because both himself and myself spent hours with Walter, and Walter deflected us. He ignored us. He didn't want to do a Bible study with us. And now he's coming up with ridiculous stuff. The even the text that he uses, the standard Ephesians 2:15, Acts, okay, he uses Acts 2, by the way. And then he uses Galatians 2, doesn't use Galatians 4, uses Romans in it as well. But he doesn't even use it in the context that the standard Seventh-day Adventist church uses. Okay? He actually uses the inverse of it. So he speaks with two tongues.
He's
And
very, it's very weak and it's very
did you
hard
watch
to
it? It
listen to. It
is
was like,
so
but
weak.
people sit on his word and everything he says is right. So they listen and don't think. And it's like, if you really think about what he's saying, some of it doesn't make sense. Not that I'm perfect, not that BE is, not that
No.
my dad was, but he had people coming. In fact, I think Abel probably knows some of that better than I do. He had people coming there when he decided to retire and have meetings there at his house in Terabella. And they started doing it as evangelistic series because he would go down and have it and they would just go right out the back door
Is
because
it?
the church would be like, we have to relearn and reteach everything after you leave, because he would talk about Mrs. White and different things and things they didn't want to agree with, and the Sabbath, the Bible, the mark of the beast, all that stuff. Anyway, so they would, leave. So people were getting really flustered. So they would come all the way up there to my dad and he would have the meetings. And then that's when somebody came up to him and wanted, there were several people more, a lot of people want to take credit, but there were a lot of people that talked to him. And he decided to
study.
study out and do something against the feast, basically, because he
Same.
had all this knowledge and he was going to show them that, it's not, he didn't agree with Christmas a long time ago. Mom was
Yeah.
always a big Christmas person and I was, and I mean, she decorated and the food, everything was fantastic at all the holidays. And so it was kind of hard on her. My dad, he was never really into it. He would have it, but he would just kind of like, okay, and just that way, it wasn't a big deal. But when he started studying it, he was like, wait a minute. And he did it on his own, didn't go by anybody else. He just went and studied it. And then he realized it. It's like, wait. So that's when he started changing. And then he started doing stuff for that. And when he did that, those people that were coming there, he lost a lot of them because they didn't understand and they didn't want to. And he wasn't pushing them. He wasn't doing anything, but you don't. So he wrote the book, Holy History, and everything kind of got started. And then he would have people there for that. And I have pictures inside the studio where a lot of not out in the church that we, built later, but in the studio right there. It was beautiful. The tables were up and they had beautiful, all the plates and cups and grape juice. Everything was it was set so pretty for Passover. And they would have that and do different things. And it just grew and grew. And I can't remember when I first really, I can't remember what year it was, 2005, I don't know, that I really read his book. And as soon as I read it, I was like, don't mess with my Christmas, but I see what you're saying. And you're right. I'll take them both, but don't get rid of my Christmas. And it wasn't the presents. I liked the holiday. It was beautiful. And it was, but then I realized, and so I just let all of it go and I didn't really care. And we just didn't do it. But that book to me was easy. And I've had people read it and say, that's so complicated. Well, that's because they don't have an open mind. And I don't want them to have an open mind to get bad things, but read it, study it. If you don't want to agree, fine. But say it's complicated and hard reading, that's an easy little book to read.
Well, we quit keeping Christmas back in the early 50s or mid 50s, I mean. And so anyway, this woman that we associated with quite a bit, she knew that we didn't believe in Christmas anymore. And so she was the piano player at the church. And when she got up in the middle of the service and made this statement, she said, if you don't believe in Christmas, you don't believe in Jesus.
That's sad.
That one as
but
well.
that's just kind of a childish way to behave and stuff, because everybody knows, you can ask people, they know that they're just celebrating it at that time, but they don't know. Nobody knows when. So, but anyway, that's kind of where it was. And then he got more and more into it. And of course, you know how that all grew and stuff, but he had people that would come out there and we would know they were in the audience, and Abel knew, and Keith, they were in the audience just waiting to hear things, and they go back to their church and tell. And it was like, why would you do that? And so
But
by the time he went, somebody wanted Daddy to marry him. And of course, I guess anybody can. But if you want to do it with a legal ordained somebody, he didn't know if he was even ordained anymore. So we called him and they said, well, you have to write and ask if they will continue. And they weren't saying anything against him, but it's just they wouldn't tell him. And I think they took it away a long time ago. But he didn't care. And he just kept doing his own thing. And it's not like he wanted another church. He just wanted the church, people to know. So I don't know. What do you think,
but
Abel? You were
Sandy,
there.
that
You remember some of that.
but Sandy, I want you guys to do something like that, and because there's a lot of people who ask us about Elder John, and I want it to come from you, okay? And I don't know if the folks here agree. All right, you have the inside track. You knew everything that was happening there, all the bad stuff, all the good stuff, and maybe put something together from where he came, maybe a couple of years before, all his achievements in terms of the people he brought into the church. Because people, when they paint him, they paint him as this person who did nothing. Okay, and it irks me quite badly. Okay, I know it mustn't, but it does. I want to have something that I can give somebody to say, this was the man, Elder Van der Berg, that you people point fingers at. Okay, he was a man. He was a man of God. To me, the most the biggest picture, or the best bigger picture of a Seventh-day Adventist ever. There's nobody that I've ever met since then that doesn't typify a Seventh-day Adventist for me like Elder John did.
When
And
he was an evangelist, he did,
correct, he was a
everybody really
true
liked him,
evangelist.
but they retired him early. And I don't
Yeah,
care if they hear it because it's in the papers and it's a fact.
but
They
you need to
retired him
say that.
early,
Yeah.
and he could have done something, but he said, no, if they don't want me, I don't want it. Because
Well,
he could
who
have got a
wants
lot
to?
more. His
Yeah.
pension was small and he was with them for a long time and he gave a lot, but
Mhm.
they didn't like it. And they tried to tell him, stop talking about this and that. And some of the churches didn't want anything to do with Mrs. White. Some didn't want anything to do with the Mark of the Beast, any of his
Mhm.
evangelism series that you see. So when he was finished and he found the feast, he went back through and redid almost all 28, maybe 24 of
Yeah.
his series. And he redid them to add in texts that a lot of times evangelists will leave out. And he would add them in to, to share more about the
Mhm.
feast and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but I know Abel was there for some of that when they were going back and forth, and he'd go out there and he would hear it from the church and stuff.
Yeah.
Right, Abel?
Yes, one of the things that really impressed me was his character.
Yes.
You know, his character is a lot different than ministers in the church.
Yes.
Way
Yes.
different.
Well, that's what Mrs. White said in one of those quotes. When when you can't come against the message, then you go against the messenger.
That's it.
Right.
You play the person, not the ball. That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Yeah.
And you see, and instead of going and studying, you go after the messenger.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's just doing it for this reason or that reason. And all the people saying that he just wanted the real estate to get rich. And I'm like, the man passed away. He didn't
Yeah.
have everything that was there. Anybody that saw it was all the ministry. He had his
Yeah.
house, but everything else was the ministry, and
Yeah.
it had nothing to do with him. And as you know, it didn't have anything to do with me. When we sold it, it wasn't near what we thought. And
Well, when he would have the feast, I remember when I started going there, it wasn't John doing the speeches. He would do one or two, but it was everybody else.
That's it. He gave everybody
Yeah.
an opportunity to talk.
That's
And
right.
that to me was one of the weirdest stuff when I got to Terabella, is that I still remember Sandy explaining to me that some of the speakers were not feast keepers. I'm going, and you allow them? And she says, no, my dad does. That talks to the character of the man.
Yeah.
Okay, because he believed in what I believe today. Okay, and that is what the Lord has given us, freedom of choice to express yourself, to come and talk about things in an open environment, exactly what you were talking about now. All right, he was not scared
He would
to
have them
allow
now and
people to come
then.
and talk.
He would now and then have them come and say things they shouldn't, and he would stand up, and you always knew because he was very good and kind about it. He would stand up and say,
Yeah.
"Well, now there's something we all need to study on, don't we?"
Yes.
Like there was something
Sandy, I
there that
must tell
caught
you
him.
one thing. I picked up on that very early when I was there that time, and I was waiting for those words to come because I was so raw and so new to the concept. Okay, and I'm
Yours
going the
was
whole time. Is he
good.
gonna is he gonna is he gonna say something? I'm gonna sit putting you back on a flight, and I'm exporting you back to South Africa now, or deporting
No,
you. So yeah,
but there were some people that wanted to be something, and they would come in on purpose and do things
yeah.
and say things. And my dad was sharp, but he was always nice. He would just sit there and smile, and then we'd
A
find out
true
later.
Christian
And
man. A true
so,
Christian man.
One thing
Yeah, my
about John that most people wouldn't do is if there was a subject that was controversial, when it was the camp meeting, he'd bring in somebody from both sides. And
yes.
then you could pray and see God and make up your own mind on what
Yeah.
felt was the
Like
truth.
the Trinity, like
Yeah.
Nader and
Mhm.
that other lady. Like I said, I still use that today with Adventists themselves. I still have that. If anybody asks me from an Adventist point of view, I give them that and I say, there we
Mhm.
are. There's two sides. Go read, go watch, go study, go check. Okay?
John's
That
the
And if
starts,
only John's
that
the
starts,
only one though that I ever saw in all my life that would let somebody present both sides.
yeah.
but that starts a dialogue and that starts a study.
Mhm.
That's exactly. I remember when I came back, I was telling people, you know what these people do on a Sabbath afternoon? They study. And they went at me, oh, okay, so don't we? No, 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 no. You're in the streets running around, handing out pamphlets to people and never following up. You think you're doing evangelism. You don't even read anything of the pamphlets that you hand out. You cannot actually talk to people. I knew this, okay? I said, what you're doing is pointless. Okay? You're actually wasting the Sabbath hours. You should be sitting together and let's study. And that is unfortunately the problem here in my country is that, like you said earlier on, the people on the Sabbath afternoon don't study, not get out into it, whatever. That's why with my group, we're getting more and more involved with this now. That's why a lot of my time is now taken up because the group is growing. And honestly, guys, uh, um, it is so important that we really take counsel to heart from Mrs. White that we use the Sabbath productively. All right. Yes, COVID has closed us down. We don't have a church or whatever. But you know what? Is actually the positivity in that is that now you don't have to drive somewhere. You can be here. We're sitting. I'm talking to you guys in America. What a wonderful thing. 5 years ago, we wouldn't been able to do this.
That's right.
Praise the Lord. I'm so happy for that.
yep,
Anyways, I'm talking too much again. Sorry, Sandy.
that's okay. That's all right. And I've often thought that we can even, this is easy to do, to get on Zoom. Don't necessarily have to have it open and recorded. We
Yeah,
can, depending on what they want to do, but anybody that wants to get on and, because you can't drive where people are, but like, if they want to just get on here and study something, that's very doable too. Somebody can just tell me
absolutely.
when and who and let people know. And it's easy to get on here and have people just talk about things and ask questions and, you know, pick each other's
Well,
brains because
I, wa-
a lot of
I
it
was look.
goes right over mine. I'm asking Keith stuff all the time. I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
uh,
Like, I
I
don't
must be
know.
honest with you. I looked at your pictures of your house this week. Those pictures you of the sky and whatever, and I had this very sort of clear thought. It said Sandy is halfway to heaven. When I looked
That
at
my
that
what?
picture, you're
Halfway
halfway
to
to
heaven.
heaven.
Uh,
Remember, there was a series somewhere years ago that was called Halfway to Heaven. You're halfway to heaven. If I look at those pictures, they're so
Yep,
beautiful.
yep,
Okay, so yeah, I was looking at it.
yep.
Anyways, folks, I'm gonna get off. It's 9 o'clock at night. Us old
Okay.
people now have to take our walker and go to the bed. You rest of you are probably still bouncing into the
Don't
Sabbath.
trip over the doggies.
Oh, goodness. Okay, if I can get some space in the bed, tell me about it. Folks, have an awesome Sabbath. I'll
All
speak to you
right,
soon.
you guys all too.
Bye
And
bye.
we will see everybody on Wednesday. I'm here if anybody needs anything or anything happens.